Hello and welcome to everyone across the nation joining today's workshop on how to register new students in your online database using CASAS e-tests online. This workshop provides a step-by-step tutorial on setting up a session to collect student registration information. This includes demographics, personal and labor force status, primary and secondary goals, zip code and ward if applicable in your state, and we also have plans to add address, phone, and email information. A certified coordinator creates the registration sessions, and a certified proctor conducts registration. Registration can be conducted separate from testing or combined. As mentioned in previous workshops, that this simply is one of 23 complementary CASAS online implementation workshops. We do not expect you to attend all 23. However, we highly recommend attending as many as possible. This is simply a training room set up to conduct all 23 workshops. Online help documentation is available on our website under Training and Support, e-test help documentation, and TE help documentation. Under the e-test help documentation, you will want to be sure and bookmark the CASAS e-test online guide. This, as well as ET and TE help documentation, bookmark these as your electronic go-to resources, particularly the guide because it provides information covered in these workshops. For today's workshop under Intake Resources, there is a document titled Data Collection Details. This is also included in the guide. Data Collection Details is a separate document here, and I'll just click on that. So it starts out with a table of contents. It's missing a title page, so don't be alarmed with that. But at least it's a functional document that provides demographic details, personal and labor force status details, primary and secondary goals, and details about the instructional programs. Now in the guide, today's workshop will cover Section 9. So let's go to the table of contents here. Section 9 titled Data Collection. Let me increase this screen here for you. Okay, Data Collection and appendices. Now let's go to the next page here. I, J, K, and L, which are included in that standalone document that I just showed a moment ago. Okay. And you will also find screenshots of the data collection screens included in the tutorial for administering tests. And that begins on page 72. So let's pop over to page 72. Let's see if it'll take us directly to 72. Here we go. Okay, and these are the data collection screens with prompts. Now these prompts are not included on the screens themselves. These are designed to assist the proctor while going through the testing process or a registration process. Okay, and it takes the proctor screen by screen to indicate whether a screen that will allow multiple marks or single marks, or screens that are optional and screens that are required. Okay. Now before we get started, folks, I do want to point out where you will find access to CASAS e-test online as well as TOPS Pro Enterprise online. The main domain name address, and I'll go ahead and enter this in the chat box, prefaced with, let me add production. The production server is where you will be producing live data. Anything and everything related to CASAS e-test online is front and center in your screen. When you are ready to manage your data and generate pre-formatted reports, then you will want to access TOPS Pro Enterprise Online, which is the data management application of the shared database of e-test online. Okay. For today's workshop, We are going to use the simulation server for Rolling Hills Adult School. This has fictional data. You can acquire a document on how to access the simulation server from the Getting Started category in the eTest help documentation, and there is the simulation server document here. Okay, so let's go ahead and go into today's workshop. And for those of you who joined the previous workshop on the intake process, thank you so much for returning. Again, I do apologize for my snafus in the last workshop session. So let's keep our fingers crossed. Let's hope this workshop goes smoothly. Again, folks, I do encourage you to ask questions along the way. Give me the opportunity to bring clarification to the information that I am sharing with you, and perhaps that will also help others participating in today's workshop as well. Now, before I get started here, let me put, whoops, hold on. Just so that you see the differences in the URLs, I've put in the chat box the production server URL and the simulation server URL, okay, so that you see clearly the difference there. All right, so let's go ahead and move on into today's workshop. I'm going to sign in as a certified coordinator, so that I can show you the configuration of the testing sessions used for conducting registration. Now, to simplify this list, I'm going to search for sessions with the word practice. Okay. All sessions must have something selected on the modalities tab, and the most minimal selection would be practice tests. So in our simulation server, we have program sets of sessions that include ABE or sessions configured for ABE and ESL programs. Now, in the context of using CASAS eTest Online or the user interface as a registration system, you can also have a session that you title simply registration. It does need to include practice, and in this sense, you can have both all three modalities available: reading, math, and listening practice tests displayed on the screen. Okay, if you are simply conducting an ESL intake session, then of course you would use the ESL registration with practice, and likewise with the ABE. Often programs have combined ABE and high school diploma completion, or high school equivalency prep programs, such as preparing students for the GED, the HiSET, or the TASC equivalency exams. And depending on the scale score from test results, will determine if students are ready to go into an ASE program. ASE stands for Adult Secondary Education. If students, and let me just, I'm going to pop over here real quick to the intake resources, because this is important, folks. We talked about an intake process in the last session and placing students based on the lower pretest score. Looking at, and I'll go here with the using this as an example here for WIA Title II, because it includes both ABE and ESL. Notice it says for ABE and ASE programs. Okay, so generally students that are accepted into an ASE program, whether it is high school diploma completion or high school equivalency prep programs, that would be EFLs 5 and 6, which is for your low ASE secondary adult education program. And generally you would accept students into those programs whose pre-test scores are 236 and above. Okay, to be eligible for an ASE program. If students score below 236, then typically they are placed in an ABE program. Okay, so you can have additional sessions configured for high school diploma as well as high school equivalency. Some of you may have programs that have combined ABE, ASE students in one class. So there are a lot of variables. However, the CASAS eTest Online application gives you a tremendous amount of flexibility to fine-tune and customize the sessions to align with the programs that you offer. So you may want to begin thinking about establishing a formal intake process and ask yourself, does that intake process, does it include orientation, or are you going to hold, say, a registration session with orientation completely separate from the testing process as demonstrated through the intake session earlier. You can incorporate the registration data collection screens with the testing process. But just know that would increase your overall time or time frame that you'll need to set aside for that testing event. All right, so and you may very well be a program that, say, might not even have the time to administer a locator and pre-test in one testing event, because you're talking about a minimum of 75 minutes combined per modality. And so a general intake process administering 2 modalities, you would want to carve out a 3-hour block of time. Okay, and if you are an organization that does not have the luxury of 3-hour blocks of time, then you may need to break up the whole intake process. Maybe separate out the registration process from the testing process. Or if you combine registration with the intake process, then perhaps only administer the appraisal and not a pre-test combined with registration. You do have that option. We do have the standardized fixed form reading, math, and listening appraisals. Each one consumes an online test administration because it is a standardized form, and each one lasts approximately 30 minutes each. So you are so compared, if you do a side-by-side comparison with a locator is 15 minutes with 7 to 9 test items drawn at random from the test item bank, compared to an appraisal, which is a fixed form of approximately 20-25 questions in the same format. It is standardized, so, but it's very broad. It has to cover all levels, and that's administered in a 30-minute time frame. But we do have programs that only have that amount of time to conduct an appraisal and then place, and please know that placing students based on appraisal scores only is accurate enough, or is appropriate enough for accurate placement. But be sure and have the student take their pre-tests sooner than later, no more than 2 weeks once they are placed in a program. Ideally, if you can have them return the next day, or perhaps even conduct a registration before you open up your program, say before a fall semester or before a spring semester or summer session. Conduct pre-registration, and then upon entry into the program, when the program officially starts, students all take their pre-test. So those are some type of things that you can consider. Okay, so just to recap here, CASAS eTest Online can be used as a registration system if you do not already have a formal registration system that you are required to use. So you can collect the demographic, program information, personal and labor force status, goals, and zip code and ward if applicable. and then combined with the TOPS Pro Enterprise database, the shared database, CASAS eTest Online shares the database with TOPS Pro Enterprise Online, and TOPS Pro Enterprise Online, it is programmed and designed to meet general requirements for all national reporting systems, in other words, NRS. So for those of you who will have full enhanced access to the online system, you have the luxury of printing NRS federal tables so that you can monitor your data collection efforts and the pulse of your organizations. Those of you who have been with us for a while are using CASAS assessments. If you have been a user that has used entry records, Scantron entry records, please take comfort in knowing that you can truly eliminate the entry record altogether and scanning the time spent in scanning the entry record information, because the CASAS eTest user interface can collect all of the information that is otherwise collected on an entry record. The only piece of information is missing is actually enrolling students in a class, and that can be done through the TOPS Pro Enterprise user interface. That information can be imported from a third-party registration system. And folks, if you do have a formal registration system that perhaps can provide registration type information, that information can be made importable into your CASAS eTest Online application or the CASAS Online system so that the student records are completed. Okay, so let's go through, actually before I filter that, I should have just shown this here. As I demonstrated briefly in the previous workshop, we had these intake sessions that combined the registration process. So if you do not use the registration sessions, then as you saw, for those of you from the previous workshop, you saw that the data collection screens are presented during the intake process. Now, albeit I streamed through those screens and did not give you the luxury or pleasure of understanding those screens, so now we're going to take it a little bit slower, folks, and actually talk about the registration screens. And I'm going to do it in the context of holding a registration session. Now, you can also, proctors can be, you can have as many sessions started in the same location, in the same lab or classroom, all running simultaneously to test any type of student from any type of program, new, current, and returning students. So we could actually, in the same day or time frame, we could be having some students going through a registration process, say maybe using this session here, as we have students going through, say, ESL post-testing. At the same time, we might have some students going through ESL intake, and likewise for ABE. So you can have multiple sessions running simultaneously, and so when we configure sessions and apply them to your online database container, then you can pick and choose which sessions will work best for your programs. So I'm going to just keep it simple here and show these types of registration sessions. So let's say you want to hold a generic registration session. You have no idea what program students are going into. You just simply want to get the information into your online database. So the certified proctor will need to actually start the session. But let me just, as I'm still signed on as a coordinator, actually, no, I'm going to go back. I'm going to sign on as a proctor, actually, because then I can show you the configuration combined. Let's go ahead and filter here to simplify the list. Collapse the, refresh, collapse the screen. Alrighty, so let me go ahead and start this generic registration session. Again, I'll acknowledge my duties and responsibilities. Let's say I'm just conducting registration for 2 hours. Okay. Again, you do need to identify the stations that are available for registration. Now let's just quickly look at the configuration here. This generic registration session here is going to offer practice tests in reading, math, and listening. So we have all three modalities enabled. Practice. And practice items, generally, they're not timed. But we will collect demographics, personal and labor force status, primary and secondary goals, zip code, and I kept Ward on here just so that you would see what it looks like, but you would not normally enable Ward if it is not applicable in your state. Ward generally applies to WIA Title I funded programs, and Washington, D.C. actually requested Ward to be added to the data collection screens. Okay, and this particular session we're opting to not record a program enrollment, since at this point we're not sure which program these students will be enrolled in. Okay, so the proctor has readied the session, has activated the session, activated the station, and now goes to the actual testing station, clicks administer test. Now, even though we are not administering a test, folks, well, administering practice tests if the student so chooses and has time, but this is the only way that you can get the user interface up on a testing station. So you have to click administer test, run the executable file so that it makes connection with the CASAS hosted server and sees that this is a registered station at the North Campus in the assessment center, and this is station number 1. Okay, so I'm going to enter in an ID. IDs are assigned by you as the organization. Oh, and Sarah, I'm sorry, I missed your question. Are you allowed to help students with the registration questions? Absolutely, yes. Yes, you definitely can. And so that's where those data collection details, and let me just pop over here real quick. Let's see. This document here, this data collection details, will take you field by field of detailed information on assisting students in completing those fields, okay? And where it gets a little bit tricky is helping them to identify their native language, for example, ethnicity, race, and so forth, okay? So at the testing station, the ID, we always get asked this, is who assigns the ID? The answer is you. Right now, the online system does not have the capability built in or the functionality built in to auto-assign IDs. That is on our task development list. I don't have a projected rollout date on that, but that has been requested. If you are an organization that does not otherwise have a formal registration system. Now, if you do have a formal registration system that you are bound and required to register all students participating in your programs, then of course that is your primary database for student information. And the CASAS online system then becomes a secondary database with regards to the student registration information. And as mentioned, you can certainly share that information through electronic handshake between the two systems, through importing and exporting. But in any case, folks, whether you have that electronic handshake connection with your registration system or if you don't, they're completely separate. It is important and highly recommended to use the same ID that students are assigned in your what we call third-party registration system. Okay, so you may need to rethink your intake process. If you are an organization who has typically assessed students before the students are even registered in any kind of system, you're going to need to flip-flop that. You're going to need to figure out a way to have students go through a quick registration without enrolling them in a class, in a program, or a class within a program. Just enough information to generate an ID that they are then given to use in the CASAS online system. Does that make sense, folks? I'll take that as a yes. Okay, so I have a fictional ID here. Again, just real quick, fictional IDs can either be all numeric, all alpha, not fictional, I mean any type of IDs, I'm sorry. Can be all alpha, all numeric, or a combination of alphanumeric characters, including dashes, slashes, periods, or spaces. Okay, so for right now, I'm just using this ID here. Okay, at minimum, students are required to enter in a first and last name. Middle name is optional. Okay, we do recommend at least an initial. Trust me, folks, this will help you in detecting any possible duplicated records in your online database. If you are using a student's date of birth as an ID, often students from other countries will reverse month and day or reverse the year, such as if it's 1957, they may put 75 instead of 57. So here again, to help you detect any possible duplicated records, try to collect as much information about the student as possible. Okay, this is what the zip code and ward screens look like. Now, ward is required. If you are enabling it, it is required. If you are a state that or a program that ward means nothing to you, then of course you would not enable ward. Okay. Now, of course, the zip code would be their primary residence. Okay, and of course, gender is explainable there. Date of birth. So let's go ahead and do date of birth here. I'm just answering at random here. Oh, by the way, on the date of birth screens, the students do need, if it's a single digit birth date, then they do need a preceding 0 on single digit birth dates. Okay. Now, highest grade level completed, the student should indicate the number of years of formal schooling completed in the United States or abroad. Okay, so a typical example is students perhaps going through, say, the 9th grade, and perhaps in their own country, so they can be directed to check majority of my schooling was outside of the U.S. if that's applicable. And typically students might receive a technical certificate by the time they complete 9th grade. But whatever the case, the student should mark on this screen, particular screen, mark only 1. They cannot mark 2. Notice it'll change, okay? So they mark 1 to indicate the highest credential or degree achieved. Schooling in the United States or abroad is included. Okay, so but if they earned this degree or diploma outside of the U.S., then they should indicate as such. Now, native language, more and more students are bilingual or come from bilingual homes. However, the native language selected here, they should only mark 1. Indicating the prevalent language that is spoken in the home as a child. Okay, so whatever that may be, then that should be selected there. Ethnicity, this is a required field. If a student selects, I'll say, not Hispanic or Latino, they are required to select race. Notice I cannot bypass the screen. If the student selects Hispanic or Latino, then they can bypass the race screen. Okay. Now, just going back to that real quick with regards to ethnicity, they mark 1 or the other here, to indicate the group with which they primarily identify. Now, with regards to race, they can mark 1 or more. If I marked not Hispanic or Latino, and I may be white and Asian, they can place multiple marks in race. Now, with regards to personal status, and folks, we are going to be adding prompts to these screens, but students can mark all that apply to them. You can talk about some of these, and in the data collection details document, it helps to describe, such as the acronym for TANF or WIA, and so forth, and it provides additional details to assist students in making the appropriate selections. If none of these apply to the student, they can actually skip that screen. Labor force status, they should mark 1. And so we'll go ahead and mark 1 there. And folks, we often get asked, you know, why those particular data collection screens? The answer is those data collection screens align with the NRS data collection requirements. Again, CASAS eTests Online shares a database with TOPS Pro Enterprise Online, which meets the minimum NRS requirements, or data collection requirements. Okay. Now, primary and secondary goals, this should be attainable within the current program year. So the student should select one primary goal, and generally the primary goal corresponds with the instructional program in which they are seeking to enroll. And then the secondary goal generally corresponds with their labor force status. Okay, so those are kind of a few tips, guideline tips. Now, that ends the data collection screens. Once the student has completed those screens, then they can review the information that they have entered. If they see an area perhaps that they made a mistake, they can return directly to that screen and make the correction and go right back to the review. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and save this information. And now you see on the test menu, I have all available practice tests. We are going to be adding additional math practice tests as well as additional reading practice tests. Okay, so students can practice as many times as they want. Nothing gets recorded. The practice tests are simply present and designed to give you the opportunity and the student the opportunity to understand how CASAS web-based tests are delivered. The practice tests are not designed to determine any type of skills at this point. In fact, the review screen at the end does not give them any type of results. So the student really doesn't know how well they have answered the practice tests. But practice tests can be used, let me just log out here for a moment, can be used in, let's see, let's go back, in the classroom. Let me just go ahead and click Manage and stop this session here. Okay. For example, this ESL practice test would display, I'll just go ahead and show this just really quick. Oops. Didn't mean to cancel that. Within the lab or within the classroom, instructors could incorporate practice tests without risk of compromising test security. It's a great way for proctors to, in a classroom group lesson or individual lessons, go through the testing process, even to the point of data collection screens as well. Those can be discussed in the classroom. So you see this is an example of a practice test session for an ESL program with reading and listening. And then you also have the, let's go ahead and stop this. You don't have to stop each session, folks, each time. I'm just doing that for simplicity's sake here. But I'm starting the practice test session for an ABE program. You always have to activate the station. And now this is will only display reading and math practice tests. Okay. So you can see that there are several options. And by the way, folks, we are developing a user interface to where the practice tests do not require a student login. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and manage and stop this session. So folks, that's essentially it on the registration process. When students complete registration, you can see the information about the students from the Students menu in the CASAS eTest user interface. As you can see here, we have several students. You can see the information that has been collected and recorded in the online system for them. You can even filter for students. Such as if I filtered for the student that I just created here or added was Susie student. So you can see Susie student right here, and this is the student that we just added to the online database. Now, this week, folks, we actually are going to begin transitioning into TOPS Pro Enterprise, the data management side of the online system. So when we do, then I'll start to bring in the correlation of the data that you see here in eTests to the data that you will, the identical data that you will see in the TOPS Pro Enterprise user interface. Okay. Now, just while I'm on here and ending this workshop, for any student that you may filter for or any student that displays here, any tests that the student may have taken. Now, I know that we didn't take a student as this test, so I'm not going to click on tests, but let's see if Susie Galejos has taken a test. Not in the current program year, so let's take off the current program year and look in the prior program year. No, it doesn't look like she has any tests at all. But you can take a look at tests associated with a specific student, as well as look at the student's information. Now, folks, this information here is non-editable. It's simply a list of the data. It's a quick view into the shared database with TOPS Pro Enterprise. You can filter for students or whatever the information displays on this screen, and you can actually, by expanding this filter, oh, no, you can't on this one. I'm sorry. Let me go back here. If you have students who have tests, such as Rick Williams here, and let's, oh, okay, well, Rick Williams doesn't have information there. Maybe Trayla Ford. Okay, here's one here. You can actually export this information out onto an Excel spreadsheet, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into retrieving results and generating reports through CASAS eTest, which is the first workshop for tomorrow, titled Retrieving Results. Okay. So folks, any questions that you may have on using the CASAS eTest Online user interface as a registration system? Okay, I guess I'll take that as a no and invite you back for tomorrow on retrieving results through the CASAS eTest user interface, and then we'll turn around and retrieve those same exact results through the TOPS Pro Enterprise user interface, as well as an introduction on generating reports for those test results. Okay, thank you so much, folks, for your participation today. And if you have any questions that you may think about afterwards, please don't hesitate to send me a quick email. Okay, and thank you for your time, and we'll see you back tomorrow.